Imagine waking up one morning and learning that Earth has been kicked out of the solar system, like a tenant evicted from the warm glow of the sun. No more sunrise selfies, no more solar power, and definitely no more beach days. But the real question is, how long could Earth survive, floating through the dark emptiness of interstellar space? Spoiler alert, it's not a short trip, but it's also not instant death, at least not right away. Now, before we start packing sweaters and saying goodbye to daylight savings, let's figure out how this cosmic eviction could even happen. Earth doesn't just drift off by accident. Space isn't that casual. Something big has to push us out. Maybe a passing rogue star swings by too close, tugging our orbit out of balance. Or perhaps a wandering black hole, minding its own business, cruises past our neighborhood and gives the solar system a gravitational shove. One moment we're in a stable orbit, the next we're cosmic debris with a bad sense of direction. It's the universe's version of being unfriended without warning. Good evening, curious minds. Science doesn't need to shout to be fascinating. Sometimes it's best enjoyed the way you'd enjoy a late-night conversation. Quietly, with a cup of tea, and maybe the soft hum of a fan in the background. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where and when you're tuning in. And if you find yourself learning something new as you drift toward sleep, consider subscribing. No pressure, only if you enjoy these calm journeys through the universe. Now, let's begin. When we say Earth gets ejected, we mean it literally breaks free of the sun's gravitational pull. Imagine throwing a baseball hard enough that it never comes back down. Now, imagine doing that with a planet. The energy needed for that is absurd, like flicking a marble off a bowling ball using a feather. But in space, given enough time and chaos, it happens. Stars pass, orbits shift, and sometimes entire planets are sent packing. Astronomers have spotted these so-called rogue planets wandering between stars, lonely travelers that once belonged to a system but got the boot. So yes, our eviction scenario isn't impossible, it's just spectacularly unlucky. The moment Earth is flung into the void, everything changes. The sun, that reliable cosmic campfire, starts shrinking in the sky as we drift farther away. Within weeks it's just a distant, pale dot, still visible but powerless to warm us. The solar system becomes a memory in our rearview mirror, and our planet begins its cold, slow journey into forever night. It's kind of poetic, like a breakup where we keep orbiting around old photos of the sun, wondering where it all went wrong. But before panic sets in, let's remember, physics has a dark sense of humor, but it's not cruel. Earth doesn't explode, disintegrate, or instantly freeze solid. Momentum keeps it moving smoothly, silently, endlessly. The oceans don't leap into the air, gravity doesn't vanish, and the atmosphere doesn't immediately blow away. For the first few hours, or even days, life continues almost normally. People might look up and wonder why the sunrise looks slightly off, or why the days feel a little colder. At first, it would just seem like an unusually long winter, until we realize the sun isn't coming back. Imagine the panic headlines: global cooling, experts recommend sweaters, or sun missing, officials promise it's not an eclipse. Scientists would scramble to calculate what happened. News anchors would try to explain orbital mechanics while sipping cold coffee under artificial studio lights. And ordinary people? They'd start buying every flashlight, blanket, and can of beans in sight. The world's last sunset would become the most watched live stream in human history. But beneath all the human drama, something deeper happens. Earth itself begins to change. The balance that kept our planet alive starts unraveling. The atmosphere cools, the winds slow, and the great engines of weather sputter to a stop. Clouds linger longer. Storms lose their punch, and the oceans, those glittering mirrors of sunlight, turn dark and still. Our planet, once bustling with heat and light, begins the long descent into silence. There's also a strange beauty in it, in a haunting kind of way. Imagine standing outside as the sun fades into a dim orange ember. Shadows stretch endlessly, and the stars, once washed out by daylight, start to glow fiercely, more vivid than ever. For the first time in human history, every star in the sky would be visible at once. The Milky Way would blaze overhead, a luminous river of light cutting across the eternal dark. It would be breathtaking, right before it becomes bone-chilling. What's incredible is how long Earth would keep moving, even after everything we know collapses. There's no friction in space, no air to slow us down, so we'd drift onward forever, an unlit marble carrying the fossilized traces of life. It's eerie to think about. Billions of years from now, Earth could still be out there, quietly coasting between stars, its continents frozen, its cities buried beneath ice, its orbit long forgotten. If humanity somehow survived that first cosmic shove, we'd be forced to rethink everything about existence. Our myths, our science, our sense of home. All of it centered around that one bright star. Without it, we'd be wanderers in every sense of the word. Our calendars would be meaningless, our clocks absurd, our sense of day gone forever. The planet would keep spinning, but the concept of morning and night would vanish. Earth would no longer have a sky. It would have a ceiling of stars that never move. And yet, in the middle of that infinite dark, there's something almost comforting about knowing Earth would still go on. Gravity would still hold it together. The magnetic field would still hum. Deep inside, molten rock would still flow and churn. Even without sunlight, the planet's heart would keep beating for millions of years. In a strange way, it's as if Earth refuses to die, even when the universe itself tells it to leave the party. So, as our blue world drifts into the cosmic abyss, there's a kind of tragic elegance to it. We'd lose the warmth that made us, but not the structure that defines us. The story of Earth wouldn't end. It would just change genres. From a bright, living world to a ghostly traveler, from a sunlit paradise to a silent wanderer of the stars. The cosmic ejection notice might sound like a death sentence, but in truth, it's just a new chapter in the longest road trip ever taken. The moment Earth drifts beyond the sun's grasp, light levels drop fast. Within 8 minutes, the time sunlight takes to reach us, the sky goes black. The only light left comes from the faint stars, like a cosmic power outage. Without sunlight, our planet's temperature plummets faster than your motivation on a Monday morning. In just a few weeks, the average surface temperature would dip below freezing, and oceans would begin to glaze over with ice. That 8-minute window is poetic, really. The last photons from the sun are already on their way, zipping across 93 million miles of space at the speed of light. When they arrive, it'll be the final wave goodbye, the last golden touch of warmth our planet will ever feel. Then, just like that, darkness swallows everything. No sunset, no twilight. The light simply fades, as if someone pulled the plug on the sky. You would step outside expecting a dawn that never comes. The birds wouldn't sing because their internal clocks would be lost, and plants would remain still, confused by the eternal night. It would feel less like a natural event and more like the world suddenly forgot how to breathe. The psychological weight of losing sunlight would hit humanity even faster than the cold. We're wired for cycles of light and dark, for the rhythm of day and night. Without it, our bodies and minds start to unravel. Circadian rhythms, those invisible timers that tell us when to wake, eat, and sleep, would go haywire. People would experience fatigue, depression, and disorientation. Imagine millions of humans trying to live on a planet where every day feels like 3 a.m. The first few weeks would be chaos not just for ecosystems, but for minds. Hospitals would fill with cases of solar withdrawal, a very real, very grim new condition. Then the temperature begins its graceful nosedive. The air, once thick with humidity and warmth, starts to thin as molecules slow down. Winds weaken, oceans stop evaporating as quickly, and clouds grow heavier but more reluctant to form rain. The hydrological cycle, the grand recycling machine that keeps weather alive, begins to seize up. Within days, frost creeps across windows from the inside. Rivers form brittle shells of ice, and lakes mirror the stars above instead of the sun. In a month, the average global temperature would hover around 0 degrees Celsius. Some areas would be colder, some less so, depending on their previous climates. The equator, once a line of heat and life, would start to resemble modern-day Antarctica. Tropical rainforests would stiffen into frozen jungles of glassy leaves and silent canopies. The oceans, still moving sluggishly under their freezing skin, would trap air bubbles and marine creatures alike in a shimmering prison of ice. If there's one silver lining, it's that snow would finally fall in places that had never seen it before. Sahara dunes would be blanketed in white. The Amazon would sparkle like a diamond-covered forest. Beauty would outlast warmth, for a while anyway. But the absence of sunlight doesn't just cool the planet, it changes its personality. The sky, once blue from scattered sunlight, would turn completely black, even at noon. Stars would burn brilliantly, cold and sharp. And the Milky Way would stretch from horizon to horizon like a frozen river of light. It's strange. Without sunlight, we'd actually see the universe more clearly. The irony of losing your star only to gain a better view of all the others would not be lost on anyone still awake to witness it. As the surface cools, the atmosphere begins to behave differently. Temperature differences between regions are what drive wind and weather, and without the sun, that energy source disappears. The jet streams stall, trade winds fade, and storms stop forming. The Earth's air settles into eerie stillness, like a paused movie. Clouds drift sluggishly, frozen mid-formation. Lightning, thunder, rain, all the drama of the sky, fade away into silence. The world becomes meteorologically dead, wrapped in a dark, motionless calm. In this new cold equilibrium, life scrambles for a foothold. Photosynthesis, the foundation of almost every food chain, shuts down completely. Plants stop making energy. They don't die instantly. They coast on stored sugars for a few days, but soon their leaves wither, their stems crack, and their roots freeze in the soil. Forests become graveyards of frozen green. Herbivores starve first, followed by predators. The collapse of ecosystems happens quietly, invisibly, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Yet the Earth itself isn't giving up. Heat continues to seep from the planet's interior, slowly, stubbornly, keeping the deep crust warm. This trapped heat rises faintly through the frozen ground, enough to keep the soil beneath glaciers slightly damp, even as the air above grows impossibly cold. It's almost as if the planet is tucking its warmth deep inside, saving it for later. Human civilization would enter a frantic race against time. The last sunlight would trigger panic and invention in equal measure. Cities might try to extend their days with floodlights and massive reflectors, burning every last drop of fuel to simulate daylight. You can imagine people gathering in public squares beneath the glow of thousands of electric bulbs, pretending for a few hours that the sun still shines. But electricity only lasts as long as we have power, and without sunlight to charge solar farms or grow crops, every kilowatt would become precious. Soon, fire would become sacred again. Bonfires, candles, gas flames. Every flicker would symbolize defiance against the darkness. Children might grow up thinking the sun was just an ancient myth, a bedtime story told by older generations who swore the sky used to glow blue. Humanity's relationship with light would become deeply emotional, part nostalgia, part obsession. The word morning would lose its meaning, replaced by phrases like lamp time or the first hour of power. As the weeks turn into months, the thin balance between hope and frost shatters. Ice thickens across continents, and temperatures plummet far below freezing. The air becomes sharp, dry, and still. Every sound carries farther, echoing across empty landscapes. Somewhere in the dark, the last rays of sunlight, now billions of kilometers away, still race through space, carrying memories of the warmth that once bathed this planet. Goodbye, sunshine. You had a good run. After a few months, the Earth's surface temperature would fall to around minus 100 degrees Celsius. The top layer of the oceans would freeze solid, but deep below, liquid water might remain, insulated by ice like a cosmic thermos. Life near volcanic vents could keep going for a while, powered not by sunlight, but by Earth's own inner heat. Basically, microbes become the new landlords of Earth. By this point, the planet has crossed the threshold from cold to catastrophically frozen. The air no longer feels crisp, it feels dead. Step outside and you wouldn't just shiver. You'd freeze solid before you could even say, "Where did the sun go?" Metal snaps like glass, rubber turns to stone, and anything with water in it, plants, animals, puddles, people turns into a glittering statue of ice. It's the kind of cold that makes Antarctica look like a tropical vacation. The world has become a place where frost forms not just on the ground, but inside abandoned houses, creeping over walls, swallowing everything in crystalline silence. The atmosphere itself has changed character. Carbon dioxide and nitrogen, which used to drift freely as gases, now begin to condense into thin layers of frost. The air gets thinner, denser, and drier, making every breath a struggle. In the stillness, you could hear strange new sounds. Ice cracking across entire lakes, the deep groan of glaciers expanding, and the eerie hiss of frozen air collapsing as temperatures drop even further. If silence had a sound, this would be it. The oceans, the great moderators of Earth's climate, are now locked beneath a thick shell of ice. But water is a stubborn element. Beneath that frozen armor, kilometers deep, the ocean remains liquid, trapped between the crushing cold above and the geothermal warmth below. It's a strange inversion of the living world that once existed on the surface. Instead of sunlit waves and coral reefs, you have pitch-black seas warmed by the Earth's inner heat. Down there, volcanic vents spew hot, mineral-rich fluids into the abyss, and around them, life clings on, blind, alien, and persistent. These hydrothermal vent ecosystems are the ultimate survivalists. Even in today's world, they thrive miles below the surface, far from sunlight, feeding not on photosynthesis but on chemosynthesis, the process of converting chemicals like hydrogen sulfide into energy. When everything above freezes, these microscopic chemists barely notice. To them, the sun was always overrated. Bacteria, archaea, and other simple organisms cluster around the vents, forming the base of strange, self-contained ecosystems. Tube worms, ghostly shrimp, and microscopic extremophiles continue their quiet existence, blissfully unaware that the surface world has turned into a global cryogenic storage unit. On the continents, though, life is in full retreat. Forests are now fields of white skeletons, frozen mid-growth. The seashells and coral of the shallow ocean are sealed under ice. Every city, mountain, and valley glimmers under a silver-blue layer that never melts. Humans, if any still exist, would have moved deep underground, close to geothermal sources or nuclear heat. The surface would no longer be habitable. It would be an ice desert so cold that even sound travels differently. Every footstep echoes, crisp and sharp, across a world that feels abandoned by time. Under the frozen crust, however, Earth itself is still alive in its own way. The molten core still churns, sending heat upward through the mantle, keeping tectonic plates slowly grinding against each other. Earthquakes still rumble through the deep, and volcanoes occasionally punch through the ice, spewing plumes of steam and ash into the frigid air. Those eruptions would be dramatic. A sudden burst of light and heat in an otherwise lightless world. Lava would spill out, instantly freezing into black, glassy rock. It's like watching the planet try to breathe through a straw buried in ice. Volcanic regions would become rare oases of warmth. Around them, frozen gases would vaporize, creating transient atmospheres of fog and steam. For a brief time, pockets of heat could melt small lakes or create temporary rivers of slush before they freeze solid again. If microbes from the surface manage to fall into these zones, they might find refuge there, living off chemical energy or scavenging the meager warmth. It would be life's last stand, a microscopic civilization eking out an existence in the cracks of a dying planet. What's fascinating is that, despite the desolation, Earth wouldn't look entirely dead from space. The planet's new reflective surface would make it shine brilliantly, like a pearl floating through the void. Satellites, if any still orbited above, would see glaciers stretching from pole to pole, shimmering under starlight. The continents would be indistinguishable beneath sheets of ice, and only the faint orange glow of occasional volcanic eruptions would hint that something still stirs beneath. Its beauty born of ruin, the planet turned into a frozen jewel, silent and pristine. Over time, the freezing reaches a kind of balance. The upper crust becomes an insulator, trapping geothermal heat below. The boundary between solid ice and liquid ocean stabilizes at a few kilometers deep, where temperatures hover around 0 degrees Celsius. Beneath that layer, the ocean becomes a slow-moving, salty abyss. It's cold, but it's not lifeless. The microorganisms down there evolve, adapting to the new normal. Over thousands of years, they might even become unrecognizable. Life altered by eternal night and pressure. Imagine bacteria that glow faintly to communicate, or ones that feed directly on radiation and minerals. The new Earth would be theirs, not ours. In a poetic twist, the planet has found a kind of balance between death and persistence. The surface is a monument to stillness, while the deep ocean is a hidden furnace of endurance. It's almost as if Earth has decided to conserve its last bit of energy, tucking away its secrets in the depths, waiting for someone or something to rediscover them millions of years later. If aliens were to stumble upon our world at this stage, they might think it's lifeless. But dig just a little deeper, and they'd find the remnants of an ancient biosphere still clinging on, refusing to let go. They'd see that even in the darkest, coldest corners of the cosmos, life is too stubborn to quit. The big chill may have silenced the surface, but beneath the ice, Earth still whispers, a faint, defiant heartbeat echoing through the frozen dark. Humans wouldn't vanish instantly, but survival would depend on creativity and insulation. We could huddle in nuclear bunkers, live near geothermal hotspots, or build fusion-powered cities underground. It's a grim thought, but people might start using frozen statues of themselves as ice sculptures. Every resource counts when the world becomes a popsicle. The first thing to understand about human survival in a sunless world is that we're annoyingly stubborn. Our species has endured ice ages, droughts, pandemics, and the centuries of the bad Wi-Fi, so the cold void of space wouldn't be the end of us, at least not immediately. But make no mistake, survival would become an extreme sport where the prize isn't luxury or comfort. It's simply not freezing solid before breakfast. In the first months after Earth's cosmic eviction, the scramble to adapt would be desperate and chaotic. Governments, assuming any still functioned, would issue frantic broadcasts, seek shelter underground, conserve energy, stay warm. Cities would go dark, not because of power failure at first, but because people would be hoarding every last watt. Solar energy would, of course, be useless, and the few remaining nuclear reactors would instantly become the beating hearts of civilization. Imagine a world where the most valuable piece of real estate isn't beachfront property. It's the nearest functioning reactor core. Underground life would be humanity's new normal. The surface would be too cold, too brittle, and too hostile to sustain life. Subterranean shelters, old mines, subway systems, and deep geological research labs would suddenly transform into survival cities. Inside, the air would be stale but breathable, the light artificial, and the walls lined with every heat-reflective material we could scavenge. Generators would hum constantly, producing not just electricity, but the faint psychological comfort of sound in a world gone silent. But heat, precious, life-giving heat, would be our biggest obsession. Nuclear power, geothermal energy, and fusion experiments would become the holy trinity of survival. Those lucky enough to live near geothermal regions, like Iceland, or parts of the Pacific Ring of Fire, might actually have a fighting chance. Imagine entire towns built in the steaming caverns around volcanoes, their inhabitants lit by the eerie glow of magma and powered by the heat of the earth itself. It sounds dystopian, but compared to the frozen wasteland above, a volcano starts looking like prime real estate. Food would be the next impossible problem. Traditional agriculture would collapse completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis. Humanity would turn to hydroponics and fungal farming under artificial light. Mushrooms, algae, and bacteria-based food sources would dominate menus. We'd eat what grows, not what tastes good. Fancy dinners would become a myth. A warm bowl of nutrient paste would be a luxury. The slogan of this new world might be, "If it's edible and doesn't kill you, congratulations, it's dinner." In these underground fortresses, society would reshape itself. Currency might become meaningless, replaced by barter systems where heat, food, and power are the only things that matter. Communities would organize around whoever could provide stability, a scientist, an engineer, or maybe just the person who remembered how to fix a generator. Democracy might dim right alongside daylight. Survival favors structure, not debate. It's less about who's in charge and more about who keeps the air filters running. And yet, even here, humanity's peculiar spirit wouldn't vanish. We'd find ways to make art in the dark. Someone would strum an old guitar under flickering LED lights. Children would draw with charcoal on bunker walls, sketching suns they've never seen. Festivals might form around the few remaining power surges, where people gather to bask in the brief, radiant warmth of functioning lights. Laughter would sound strange in the tunnels, muffled, maybe a bit forced, but it would still exist. After all, humor is our best insulation against despair. Of course, there would be fractures too. Not every group would survive in harmony. Some would hoard heat or food, forming isolationist enclaves. Others might turn nomadic, wandering through frozen wastelands in search of abandoned facilities to scavenge. You can imagine small bands of survivors trudging across the icy remains of cities wrapped in salvaged insulation, their breath crystallizing mid-air. Streetlights frozen in time. Cars encased in frost. Every sound amplified in the still air. Boots crunching on ice, the low hum of distant machinery, and maybe, occasionally, the crack of ice as entire buildings collapse under their own frozen weight. If anyone dared venture to the surface, they'd see a world almost unrecognizable. Skyscrapers coated in frost would rise like glass monoliths. Oceans would be solid plains of white, their waves frozen mid-motion. The moon would hang in the sky brighter than ever, reflecting the faint starlight that now serves as our only illumination. It would be breathtaking and terrifying. A planet of ghosts, with humanity living in the tunnels below, like the afterthoughts of evolution. As decades pass, human technology would evolve, or regress, depending on perspective. We'd become masters of closed-loop systems, recycling every molecule of water, every scrap of carbon. Our species would become more self-contained, more inward-looking. The dreamers and scientists who once looked to the stars might now look inward, focusing on the fragile flame of life we've managed to keep alive. It's ironic. Cast out of the solar system, humanity would finally learn how to survive without it. And maybe, just maybe, someone would light a fire. Not a metaphorical one, but a literal campfire. A small, flickering flame in an underground cavern. It would serve no practical purpose. Fusion reactors and heat exchangers would do the real work. But that campfire would mean something. It would be a reminder of the world we once knew, of the warmth that shaped us, of the sun we lost. People would gather around it, not for heat, but for memory. Because that's what humans do. We adapt, we endure, and we remember. Even in the coldest, darkest place imaginable, we'd still tell stories about the sky that used to glow. The last campfire on Earth wouldn't just be about survival, it would be about defiance. A flicker of orange against the endless blue-white ice, whispering into the dark. We're still here. With no solar panels to rely on, we'd turn to nuclear, geothermal, or fusion power. Geothermal energy could keep small colonies alive, but food production would be tricky. Artificial light farms could grow plants indoors, but every calorie would cost energy. Civilization might shrink into small, glowing enclaves, a world of human fireflies trying to keep the night at bay. The disappearance of the sun doesn't just mean darkness. It means the total collapse of the world's energy infrastructure. Our civilization, for all its genius, runs on borrowed starlight. Every flickering bulb, every roaring engine, every bite of food ultimately traces back to solar energy. Fossil fuels, ancient sunlight, bottled and buried. Wind power, air masses driven by solar heating, hydroelectric dams, rainfall born from solar evaporation. Strip the sun from the equation, and the entire power grid becomes a museum exhibit of lost convenience. The first global blackout would be permanent. Entire continents would vanish from satellite view, their lights extinguished one grid at a time. The great cities of the world, New York, Tokyo, London, Lagos, would wink out like dying embers. Humanity would enter what could only be described as the Second Dark Age, but this time, literally. The survivors of the initial cold shock would immediately face a brutal question. How do you power a planet that has lost its battery? The answer would come not from innovation, but from desperation. Nuclear power, often maligned in the past, would suddenly become civilization's lifeline. Reactors once shut down for safety reasons would be brought back online, humming to life beneath layers of frost. Entire societies would organize around these glowing hearts of fission energy, their control rooms becoming the new town squares. The irony is hard to miss. Humanity, once terrified of nuclear fallout, would now huddle close to it for warmth, like moths around a reactor core. But nuclear power isn't infinite. Uranium supplies would dwindle, and mining operations on the frozen surface would be dangerous at best, suicidal at worst. This would lead to the next great shift: fusion energy. In our old, sunlit world, fusion was always a few decades away. Now, with no star to depend on, it would become a race against extinction. Fusion reactors, if perfected in time, would serve as miniature suns, the artificial hearts of human civilization. Imagine underground caverns illuminated by the bluish glow of controlled hydrogen plasma, entire cities powered by the same process that fuels stars. It would be beautiful in a haunting way. Humanity recreating the sun, not in the sky, but in machines buried beneath the crust. Geothermal energy would complement these reactors. Areas near tectonic boundaries would become hubs of life. Places like Iceland, New Zealand, or parts of East Africa, where the planet's internal heat leaks close to the surface. Colonies would be built near geothermal vents, their power plants doubling as shelters. Warmth would flow through pipes into living quarters, greenhouses, and water systems. Humanity would once again become a species that settles by fire. Only now, the fire comes from the deep belly of the earth. The challenge, however, wouldn't just be keeping warm. It would be feeding billions in a world without sunlight. Farming would move entirely indoors, powered by artificial light. The humble LED would become as sacred as the sun once was. Every plant would need to be bathed in light that mimics the solar spectrum, every greenhouse a glowing oasis in the darkness. These facilities would burn through energy like nothing else. Each head of lettuce, each stalk of wheat, would carry an enormous energy cost. Eating would become an act of engineering. A loaf of bread might represent the power output of an entire reactor for a day. Eventually, people would adapt to the energy economics of survival. Diets would shift toward lab-grown proteins, fungi and algae, foods that require less light and space. Taste would be the first casualty. Meals would be nutritionally efficient but emotionally empty. Yet even here, human culture would find a way to romanticize it. Perhaps future generations would treat photos of old Earth meals, sun-ripened tomatoes, golden fields of wheat, as sacred art. This, someone might say while spooning green protein gel, is what sunlight used to taste like. Electricity would no longer be taken for granted. Every spark would count. The night sky, once dark and expansive, would now glow faintly in scattered points where human settlements persist. From orbit, Earth would look like a smattering of tiny lights, small, warm clusters of energy surrounded by oceans of blackness. Each one would represent a surviving colony, a beacon of defiance in the eternal night. Humanity would resemble fireflies spread thin across a frozen globe, blinking against the void. Inside these pockets of light, society would evolve differently. Each colony would be a closed ecosystem, carefully balancing its energy budget. Waste heat from power plants would be recycled to warm living spaces. Exhaled carbon dioxide would feed algae farms that, in turn, produce oxygen. Even body heat would be captured through ventilation systems. The idea of waste would vanish. Every joule of energy would matter. To live would be to account for every watt, every calorie, every breath. The social fabric of this new world would also change. Energy would become the new currency, measured not in dollars or gold, but in kilowatt hours. Power allocation would determine status, influence, and survival. Leaders wouldn't be politicians or generals, but engineers, those who understand the delicate dance between heat, light, and life. The ability to maintain power output could define the fate of entire communities. Still, the human tendency to hope would not die easily. The scientific mind would persist, searching for long-term solutions. Perhaps colonists would look outward, sending automated probes to capture passing asteroids rich in fissile materials. Maybe orbiting collectors would be built to gather faint starlight or cosmic radiation, squeezing energy from even the thinnest sources. Our ingenuity, after all, has always thrived on the edge of desperation. And through it all, Earth's surface would remain dark and silent, except for the faint glows leaking through cracks in the ice, the warm breath of underground reactors rising in wisps of steam. To an alien observer passing by, those lights might look like embers scattered across a dying world. But to us, each one would mean something far greater. A promise that even in the absence of our sun, the spark of human will refuses to go out. In the end, powering a sunless world wouldn't just be about generating electricity. It would be about keeping the idea of light alive. Every watt of energy would be a statement of defiance. Every glowing settlement would whisper the same unyielding truth. We may have lost our star, but we haven't lost our fire. As centuries pass, oceans would freeze nearly solid. The atmosphere would condense and snow down as frozen nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Imagine snowdrifts of air, literally frozen sky. The planet would be covered in layers of ice kilometers thick. From space, Earth would look like a frosted marble, a cold memory of its sunny past. Over the centuries following Earth's plunge into interstellar exile, the last traces of warmth fade away like old ember. The cold is no longer a sensation, it's a presence, a weight pressing down on everything. It creeps into every valley and ocean trench, swallowing the planet layer by layer. What began as a slow freeze becomes a geological transformation. Earth is not merely cooling, it's turning to stone. The oceans, once vast mirrors of sunlight and storms, become the planet's first victims. Their surfaces harden into sprawling sheets of ice, thickening decade by decade until they reach depths that defy comprehension. The Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans become indistinguishable from the polar caps. They merge into one continuous continent of white. Waves and tides, once ceaseless, are now frozen mid-motion, sculpted into eternal ridges by the cold. Ships that never made it to harbor rest perfectly preserved beneath crystal-clear ice, like prehistoric insects in amber. If explorers from another world ever came upon them, they'd find the remains of humanity's last voyages, steel skeletons, and ghostly outlines of cities sealed beneath a glassy shroud. But the strangest transformation isn't in the oceans, It's in the air itself. The atmosphere, the invisible blanket that once protected Earth, now succumbs to the cold. Nitrogen and oxygen, normally free-floating gases, begin to liquefy and then freeze. Over time, the sky literally falls. Snow begins to fall that isn't water, it's air, crystallized into pale blue flakes of nitrogen frost and white dustings of carbon dioxide. It piles into drifts that glitter faintly under the starlight. Imagine standing on the surface of Earth as the atmosphere itself snows down, a silent blizzard of frozen breath, and the concept of weather ceases to exist. There are no clouds, no wind, no storms. Only the slow descent of the air itself, layering the planet in silence. Mountains and valleys vanish beneath this frozen sky. The tallest peaks of the Himalayas or Andes disappear, not from erosion, but from accumulation. Ice builds upon ice, compressing under its own weight until the crust beneath begins to groan. This new pressure reshapes the land itself. Glaciers expand until they merge into one planetary glacier, an unbroken shell encasing the entire world. Only the occasional crack or fissure reminds anyone, if there were still anyone left to notice, that movement still exists deep below. The colors of Earth fade too. The greens, blues, and browns that once defined continents and seas are replaced by endless white and pale blue. Even the distinction between land and sea vanishes. The equator, once a line of tropical heat, is now indistinguishable from the poles. From space, Earth gleams like a perfect frozen pearl, smooth, bright, and utterly lifeless. Sunlight, if any still reached from the distant past, would reflect brilliantly off this icy surface. For a brief time, the planet would become one of the brightest objects in the universe, a jewel of frozen reflection. Inside this frozen tomb, however, geological life continues its slow, patient rhythm. The immense weight of the ice compresses the crust, creating pressure that awakens the planet's inner heat in new ways. Deep fissures open, sometimes venting steam and gases before sealing again beneath new frost. Occasionally, the ground might tremble as magma forces its way upward, only to freeze within seconds upon contact with the surface. Each eruption would be a fleeting bloom of color and heat. Tiny, volcanic heartbeats in an otherwise motionless body. The air that remains near the surface is razor thin, incapable of sustaining anything like breathing. Sound barely travels in it, muffled by the density and stillness. If you were somehow standing on the surface, sealed in a suit capable of withstanding the cold, you'd hear almost nothing. Even your own heartbeat would feel distant, swallowed by the vacuum of quiet. The world has become not just frozen, but acoustically dead. The landscape itself would be breathtaking in its alien beauty. The ice would carve strange shapes as it flows, slowly, imperceptibly, down old river valleys and across continents. Over millennia, this frozen flow would smooth every edge, erase every mountain range, and bury every trace of civilization. Earth would become sculpted into perfection by stillness. The Eiffel Tower, the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, gone beneath kilometers of ice, preserved but unseen. Human achievement reduced to a whisper locked in crystal. Underneath, however, the planet's internal warmth would still create subtle movements. The interaction between the molten mantle and the ice above it would cause occasional cracks to form, releasing geysers of vaporized air that would instantly freeze into delicate ice plumes, frozen fountains rising from invisible depths. Over millions of years, these geysers might build strange icy spires, natural monuments to a world long gone. And above it all, the stars. The night sky, once a backdrop to human dreams and navigation, now dominates every horizon. With the atmosphere collapsed, the view of space is sharper and clearer than ever before. Starlight no longer scatters. It pierces. The Milky Way would be a blinding river of silver across the heavens, casting faint light onto the frozen ground. Shadows would form from stars millions of light-years away. It's hauntingly beautiful, like standing inside a cosmic cathedral where light is sacred and sound is forbidden. As the centuries turn into millennia, the frozen atmosphere grows thicker until it merges with the ice of the oceans, forming a single continuous crust that might reach several kilometers deep. The air that once carried bird songs and thunderstorms is now buried solid beneath layers of frozen nitrogen and carbon dioxide. In a sense, Earth has become a planet-sized snow globe, one that no longer needs shaking. To any distant observer, perhaps from another star system, Earth would appear pristine, serene, and heartbreakingly still. A perfect sphere of white and blue shimmer, reflecting faint starlight into the void. They might even mistake it for a young world, newly formed, awaiting life. They'd never guess it was once home to oceans that roared, forests that whispered, and billions of voices that dreamed under a living sun. The irony, of course, is that in death, Earth has achieved perfection. No storms to scar it, no waves to erode it, no fires to consume it. Just peace. Cold, eternal, and utterly silent. A frozen monument to everything that once was alive, a planet asleep beneath its own frozen sky. Despite the frozen surface, Earth's core remains molten for billions of years. It still pumps out heat through volcanoes and hydrothermal vents. Deep below the ice, life might cling on. Simple, microbial, and stubborn. If aliens ever visit, they'd find Earth not as a lifeless rock, but as a glowing ember with a few microbes still partying near volcanic vents. Though the sun's warmth has long vanished from the surface, the Earth itself refuses to go completely dark. Beneath the layers of ice, past the frozen crust and motionless seas, the planet's inner furnace still burns. The core, a dense sphere of iron and nickel, remains molten, its temperature hotter than the surface of Mercury. This heat, left over from the planet's birth Earth and sustained by radioactive decay, continues to ripple outward through the mantle, like the fading heartbeat of a creature too stubborn to die. To understand this subterranean world, imagine the planet as a two-layered being. On top lies a skin of solid ice, cold, rigid, and silent. Below, a restless interior still churns with molten rock and pockets of energy. The boundary between them, where warmth from below meets the cryogenic crust above, becomes a new kind of frontier, a twilight zone between death and persistence. It's there, in the hidden warmth beneath the global glacier, that Earth's last sparks of activity find refuge. Volcanoes, once dramatic spectacles of light and sound, now erupt unseen in the dark. Their plumes of magma never reach the surface. Instead, they melt small caverns deep under the ice. These underground chambers become oases of liquid water, infused with minerals and gases from the deep. If you could stand inside one of them, wearing an absurdly advanced thermal suit, you'd see frozen walls glittering like diamonds and a black lake steaming with ghostly mist. No light filters down here, but the water glows faintly with bioluminescence, the last fireworks of microbial life. Hydrothermal vents, meanwhile, continue to bubble along the seafloor, protected beneath kilometers of frozen ocean. Their superheated plumes rise like pillars of smoke into the liquid darkness, feeding entire ecosystems that don't care about sunlight. Bacteria use chemical energy from sulfur and iron instead of light to power themselves, just as they did billions of years ago when life first began. Around them, strange creatures thrive. Worm-like organisms, translucent shrimp, and maybe, in time, entirely new species that have adapted to a world of pure darkness. It's poetic, really. Life returns to the same kind of environment it started in. The circle closes. The great biosphere that once stretched from coral reefs to forests to cities has now collapsed into a few scattered hotspots, tiny islands of habitability in a sea of ice. But in these places, evolution would continue its slow work. Generations of microbes would adapt to colder temperatures, higher pressure, and complete isolation. Over millions of years, they might evolve into forms unrecognizable to us. Organisms built to harness geothermal heat and chemical gradients, not sunlight or air. Life, it seems, doesn't mourn the sun. It just changes its recipe. The surface world above, of course, remains indifferent. No sound escapes the frozen crust. When a volcano erupts below, the tremor ripples upward, but is muffled by kilometers of dense ice. A distant observer might see nothing but a faint crack forming across the smooth surface, releasing a whisper of steam that freezes instantly in the thin atmosphere. The planet's fury has been buried alive, but it's still there, breathing faintly through its icy tomb. Over thousands of years, these pockets of internal heat carve out vast networks beneath the ice. Geothermal rivers, caves, and reservoirs where liquid water persists. Some of them even connect, forming what scientists might someday call the subglacial ocean. If we could map it, it would resemble a labyrinth, an entire world hidden beneath the frozen crust. In these shadowy corridors, minerals leach from the surrounding rock, forming stalactites of ice and salt. The water is thick, briny, and hot enough to shimmer. It's not a place built for humans, but for microbes, it's paradise. If alien explorers ever visited Earth at this stage, they might find the surface confusingly perfect, smooth, bright, and utterly still. Their sensors would detect no breathable air, no chlorophyll, no signs of civilization. But if they probed deeper, if they dared to drill through the kilometers of ice, they'd encounter a different story. They'd find the faint signature of heat, the soft hum of volcanic resonance, and, to their astonishment, the chemical traces of metabolism. Imagine their surprise when, beneath the frozen shell, they discover the glow of life. Not advanced life, not cities or forests, but colonies of microbes, glimmering like underwater fireflies, clustering near hydrothermal vents that pulse with liquid warmth. To those aliens, Earth would appear as a paradox, a planet that should have died, yet didn't. A frozen ember with a living spark hidden deep inside. The persistence of this internal heat isn't just poetic, it's geological destiny. The Earth's core cools incredibly slowly. Even without the sun, it would take billions of years for that molten center to solidify completely. The radioactive decay of elements like uranium and thorium would continue to generate heat long after the surface froze. This means that, while the outer world becomes a monument to stillness, the interior remains in quiet motion. Tectonic plates may still shift slightly, mountains may still rise, though hidden under the ice, and the magnetic field might continue to hum faintly around the planet, like the echo of an old song. Over unimaginable spans of time, the frozen crust might even crack from within. Massive eruptions could briefly melt pockets of the surface, releasing plumes of steam and gas into the frozen atmosphere. From space, these would look like fleeting flares, tiny breaths from a world that refuses to die. Then the cold would reclaim them, sealing the wounds once more. Earth, in this stage, becomes a paradox of endurance, frozen above, fiery below. It is a planet caught between life and death, still warm enough to defy complete extinction. The microbes thriving near those volcanic vents may be small, but they are the last heirs of a billion-year legacy. Their survival would mark one final victory for biology over physics, a reminder that as long as there is even a flicker of energy, life will find a way to use it in. And so, deep beneath the silence of ice, the story of Earth continues, not in forests or oceans, but in the hidden warmth of the abyss. The planet that once danced in sunlight now glows faintly from within, a secret kept from the stars. Its core burns like an ancient candle behind a wall of frost, whispering to the void, "I'm not done yet." Without the sun's stabilizing pull, Earth's orbit changes and the moon's gravitational relationship could shift. Tides freeze, orbital patterns wobble, and eventually tidal friction could send the moon drifting away, or crashing into Earth. Either way, it's a rough breakup. The night sky might end with one final fireworks show, a lunar collision worthy of a cosmic drama. For 4.5 billion years, Earth and the moon have been locked in a delicate dance, a gravitational partnership that shaped our tides, our days, and even our sense of time. The moon has been our constant companion, quietly orbiting while stabilizing Earth's tilt and giving us predictable seasons. But once the sun's guiding hand disappears, that delicate choreography begins to unravel. It's as if the universe suddenly cut the music, and the dancers are left stumbling in the dark. The sun's gravity doesn't just hold planets in orbit, it also acts as a stabilizing force for their moons. Without it, Earth's path through space becomes unpredictable. The planet's orbit, once circular and balanced, drifts into an erratic, lonely trajectory. Freed from the sun's control, Earth and the moon become a two-body system adrift in the cosmic ocean, like a pair of castaways tied together. spinning slowly as they drift into the dark. At first, not much changes. The moon still orbits Earth every 27 days, and the familiar face of its cratered surface still stares back, though now illuminated only by starlight. But over centuries and millennia, subtle gravitational shifts start to accumulate. The balance of tidal forces, once stabilized by the sun's pull, begins to tilt out of sync. The moon's orbit starts to wobble. It moves closer, then farther, then closer again, tracing out irregular ellipses like a drunk figure skater on an invisible rink. Tidal friction, the process that has been slowly pushing the moon away from Earth for billions of years, begins to misbehave. Normally, Earth's rotation and the moon's gravity tug against each other in a kind of cosmic tug-of-war, transferring energy and gradually pushing the moon outward. But without the sun's influence to anchor their dance, the energy exchange can become chaotic. In one possible scenario, the moon drifts farther and farther away until Earth's gravity no longer holds it tightly. It escapes, becoming a rogue moon, an orphaned satellite drifting into deep space, perhaps eventually captured by another planet or star. Imagine the poetry of that. The moon, once our closest friend, slipping away into the void, destined to orbit nothing but memory. The other scenario, though, is far more dramatic. Instead of drifting away, the moon might spiral inward. As Earth's rotation slows under the immense drag of tidal forces, the delicate balance keeping the moon aloft could collapse. Gradually, the moon would begin a slow, doomed descent toward Earth. It wouldn't happen in a day, or even a million years, but gravity is patient. Each orbit would bring it a little closer. From the surface, this event would unfold like the most terrifying slow-motion movie imaginable. The moon would grow larger and larger in the sky, dominating it completely. Its craters would become visible to the naked eye, every scar and shadow etched with frightening clarity. What was once a comforting nightlight would become a looming wall of rock, a silent threat hanging overhead. And, as it approached, its gravitational pull would cause chaos. Even though Earth's oceans are frozen solid, the underlying crust would still feel the moon's influence. The ice would crack and heave under the shifting tides of gravity. Earthquakes would rattle the frozen continents. Massive fissures would open across the surface as the planet's crust strains under the stress. Each orbit would bring another wave of seismic fury until finally, the moon crosses what scientists call the Roche limit, the point at which its own gravity can no longer hold it together against Earth's tidal forces. When that happens, the moon would disintegrate. The breakup would be spectacular, an apocalyptic ballet of destruction unfolding in slow, silent motion. Enormous chunks of lunar rock would tear free and begin to spiral around Earth, forming a brilliant ring system. For a time, Earth would resemble Saturn, a frozen planet girdled by glittering arcs of shattered moonlight. The ring particles, illuminated by faint starlight, would shimmer like powdered diamonds. It would be hauntingly beautiful, a celestial funeral wreath spinning around a dead world. But that beauty wouldn't last. Gravity, ever the artist and the destroyer, would begin to pull the debris inward. One by one, the fragments would fall back toward Earth, burning through the thin remnants of atmosphere and slamming into the ice with unimaginable force. The impacts would trigger eruptions, melt pockets of the frozen crust, and send shock waves across the globe. From space, it would look like a world-sized sparkler. Brief bursts of light across the white surface as the moon's remains rained down. It would be the last fireworks display Earth would ever see. If any life still clung to the deep underground refuges or subglacial oceans, they'd feel the planet shudder as the bombardment reshaped it. Mountains would crumble under the impacts, and entire regions of the crust might liquefy. For a brief geological instant, the heat from the impacts could create temporary seas of molten rock, glowing faintly beneath the ice before freezing again. The moon's death would give Earth a momentary flash of warmth, a last gift from a companion it had known since its birth. And when it's all over, Earth would be forever changed. The moon, that eternal fixture of our sky, would be gone. No more tides, no more eclipses, no more romantic moonlight. Just a ring of dust slowly settling into the frozen void. Over millions of years, that ring might thin out, scattering into space until nothing remains but faint particles orbiting invisibly around the planet. The story of Earth and its moon would end as it began, in violence. Billions of years ago, the moon was born from a colossal collision that tore a piece of Earth into orbit. Now, in a tragic symmetry, it returns home in fragments. From a cosmic perspective, it's a perfect circle of creation and destruction, a reminder that nothing in the universe stays still forever. If an alien civilization were to witness it from afar, they'd see a spectacle both magnificent and melancholic, a frozen world crowned by a ring of glowing debris, slowly dimming over time. They'd never know that once, that world's creatures used to gaze up at their moon and write poems about love, mystery, and beauty. They'd never guess that the final act of that planet's story was a heartbreak written in gravity, a breakup that truly ended with the moon falling for Earth. As Earth cools, gases like oxygen and nitrogen liquefy and freeze. Breathing becomes impossible outside sealed habitats. The sky would vanish, no blue, no clouds, just a black canopy sprinkled with distant stars. It's like living inside a cosmic freezer with the lights off. The air we once took for granted, the invisible ocean that wrapped our planet in life, would become the next casualty of cosmic exile. The atmosphere, that delicate veil of molecules separating warmth from void, begins to collapse as the cold deepens. It starts slowly, quietly, like the soft sigh of a dying giant. But once it begins, there's no stopping it. Gravity holds on to what it can, but the chill of interstellar space is relentless. Every gas has a temperature at which it stops behaving like air and starts acting like something you can scoop with a shovel. Oxygen, nitrogen, argon. Each succumbs in turn as the planet's temperature dives. First, carbon dioxide falls out of the atmosphere as frost, dusting the ice with white powder that glimmers faintly under starlight. Then, nitrogen begins to condense, dripping down from the thinning air in invisible rivulets before freezing solid. Finally, even oxygen, life's breath, surrenders to the cold, crystallizing into fragile flakes that settle gently over the land. It's snowing air. Not the poetic kind of snow that falls on winter nights, but something stranger, and far more final. Imagine walking across the surface of the planet and hearing the faint crunch of frozen atmosphere beneath your boots. Each step would break what was once the breath of humanity. You could reach down and pick up a handful of what used to fill your lungs, tiny crystals of nitrogen and oxygen sparkling like ground glass. The sky itself has fallen, and now it lies in drifts. The transformation would change everything about how the planet looks and feels. Without gaseous air to scatter light, Earth's once familiar blue sky disappears completely. There would be no more dawns or sunsets, no gradients of gold or pink, no clouds drifting lazily overhead. Instead, the heavens would be a deep, unwavering black, a static view of eternity. The stars, unobstructed by air or haze, would blaze with a clarity that would be almost cruel. Every constellation would be perfect, every galaxy visible. It's as if the universe is mocking the loss of the sun by showing off all its other lights. But that perfect sky comes with silence. Sound depends on air molecules vibrating, carrying pressure waves to our ears. With the atmosphere frozen, sound dies. A hammer striking metal, a shout, a heartbeat. None of it would travel. You could stand next to someone and see their lips move, but hear nothing. Communication outside sealed habitats would require radios or gestures, turning even the simplest conversation into a strange pantomime. Earth would become a place where sound itself has gone extinct. The lack of an atmosphere would also rob the world of protection. Cosmic radiation, meteoroids, and solar particles, once absorbed or deflected by the thick blanket of air, would now strike the surface directly. The ice itself would become scarred over time, pockmarked by impacts that would once have burned up harmlessly in the sky. The frozen continents would bear new constellations of craters, slowly accumulating over the centuries. Earth would look less like the living blue marble we knew and more like its barren cousin, the moon. Inside the underground refuges, survivors would face a strange paradox. They'd be safe from the cold, but not from the absence of air. Every breath would come from machines. Oxygen would be mined from water or recycled endlessly through chemical scrubbers. Nitrogen, essential for balance in breathing mixtures, would have to be extracted from the frozen air itself, then re-vaporized. Breathing would no longer be an unconscious act of life. It would be a process managed, rationed, and measured. Every inhalation would be a reminder of how fragile existence has become. Above, the frozen air forms surreal landscapes. Great slabs of solid nitrogen and oxygen pile up in layers over the ice, creating translucent plains that shimmer faintly. Sunlight, if any reflected from distant stars, refracts through these layers like light through glass. The world becomes a gallery of optical illusions. Frozen rainbows, halos of starlight, and the faintest ghosts of old auroras trapped in crystalline form. It's hauntingly beautiful. A world where even the air has turned to sculpture. But the beauty hides danger. The frozen atmosphere is heavy, denser than rock in some places, and the weight of it adds tremendous pressure to the crust below. Over millennia, it could cause fissures to form in the ice, opening deep chasms that glow faintly with trapped gases. Every now and then, geothermal heat from below might warm these pockets, releasing sudden plumes of vapor. They'd burst upward, condense instantly, and snow back down in a glittering blizzard of frozen oxygen. These brief events would be Earth's new storms, quiet explosions of chemistry in a world otherwise too cold for chaos. If someone could stand on the surface and look around, safely sealed in a pressure suit, they would see a sight utterly alien. Mountains glazed in reflective frost, plains buried under kilometers of air ice, and a horizon that never changes. The stars wouldn't twinkle anymore. Without atmosphere, their light would be steady and sharp. Every shadow would be crisp, every edge knife-like. The planet would look like a frozen photograph, caught forever between stillness and collapse. Yet even in this frozen silence, Earth retains a strange dignity. The air that once gave it color and weather now forms its final armor. Wrapped in layers of frozen gases, the planet has become its own tomb and monument, a crystal world that preserves the memory of motion and sound. The winds that once roared, the storms that once flashed across its skies, all now lie buried beneath the transparent layers of their own making. If any distant observer, perhaps an alien civilization scanning for signs of life, were to detect Earth at this stage, they might misinterpret what they see. The frozen atmosphere would reflect light in unusual ways, creating spectral signatures that could mimic oceans or clouds. They might think the planet still breathes, still cycles air and water as it once did. They'd never know that what they're seeing is not the shimmer of weather, but the glint of air turned solid. And so, the last act of the atmosphere is to preserve the planet's illusion of life. From afar, Earth would still appear bright and beautiful, as if caught in perpetual dawn. Up close, however, it's a world where air has become ice, wind has become sculpture, and silence has taken its final, perfect form. The sky hasn't disappeared. It's simply come to rest on the ground, blanketing its planet like a frozen lullaby that will never melt. As it sails through interstellar space, Earth becomes a rogue planet, a wandering world untethered to any star. Astronomers have already found such worlds drifting between systems, proving that cosmic loneliness isn't rare. If Earth joins that club, it's basically the universe's ultimate road trip, with no gas stations, no GPS, and no pit stops. Once the last traces of sunlight vanish and the gravitational tether to the solar system breaks, Earth officially becomes a cosmic nomad, a dark marble cast into the void. It no longer belongs to any star, any family of planets, or any orbital home. The sun shrinks to a faint glimmer far behind, a warm memory receding into eternity. The solar system that raised us, our cosmic birthplace, becomes just another speck of light among billions. And for the first time, Earth is utterly alone. Drifting through interstellar space isn't like coasting through a peaceful void. It's a journey through the most extreme wilderness imaginable. Between the stars lies a realm of invisible forces, stray magnetic fields, dust clouds, cosmic radiation, and the faint whispers of ancient starlight. Space isn't empty, it's just incredibly spread out. Every cubic meter might contain a few atoms of hydrogen, cold and slow-moving, leftovers from the birth of galaxies. And as Earth travels through this endless ocean of near-nothingness, it plows through these particles like a silent ship cutting through fog. The scale of this journey defies imagination. Distances that once defined our sense of cosmic order, millions of miles between planets, light minutes from the sun, become trivial now. In interstellar space, the nearest destination is measured in light years. The nearest star system, Alpha Centauri, sits more than 4 light years away. Even traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, Earth would take tens of millions of years just to approach another star's outer boundary. In human terms, this isn't a voyage, it's an eternity. From space, Earth would look like a ghost, its surface encased in ice, faintly reflective under distant starlight. To an observer drifting nearby, it might appear as a smooth, featureless sphere, half shadowed and half glimmering. But the true spectacle would be its faint internal glow. Infrared radiation from its still warm core would leak weakly into space, invisible to human eyes but detectable to instruments. In the vast emptiness between suns, this tiny heat signature would make Earth stand out. A dim, red ember adrift in the dark. Astronomers on distant worlds, if they existed, might even spot this lonely traveler. Rogue planets like this aren't theoretical, they're real. Observations suggest our galaxy could contain billions of them. Orphaned worlds flung from their birth systems by gravitational chaos. Some are gas giants, still warm from formation. Others are rocky, frozen, and dead. Earth would fit somewhere in between, a once living world turned wanderer. Among these billions of orphans, it wouldn't even be unique. It would just be another traveler in the great, cold migration of worlds. But despite the cold, there's something hauntingly majestic about a rogue Earth. It moves with perfect stillness, obeying the physics of inertia, gliding endlessly through the interstellar medium. There's no sunrise, no orbit, no cycle, just motion. It neither speeds up nor slows down, unaffected by drag or resistance. Time becomes meaningless without days or seasons to measure it. The planet simply is, suspended in an infinite present. Inside its frozen shell, however, things continue to stir. The core still churns, tectonic plates may still shift, and occasional quakes ripple through the ice. The planet's magnetic field, though weaker, still hums faintly. If you were to place a compass on its surface, the needle would still twitch toward what remains of magnetic north. The Earth, though abandoned by its star, still clings to identity. It's a ghost of a planet that refuses to forget who it was. Occasionally, Earth might pass through clouds of interstellar dust. Rare, faint wisps of material left behind by ancient supernovas. These clouds would paint the ice with subtle tints, perhaps leaving faint streaks of carbon or iron across the surface. For a brief time, the planet's appearance might change, like a frozen marble rolling through patches of cosmic paint. The interaction would be too weak to cause any real heat, but beautiful nonetheless. The universe's slowest, quietest makeover. If by chance Earth passed close to another star system, say within a few astronomical units, it could experience a brief moment of illumination. The nearby star would appear as a distant sun, casting pale light across the frozen globe. Ice on the surface might glimmer, faint shadows might return, and for a fleeting span of centuries, the planet would seem alive again. But gravitationally, the encounter would be dangerous. The star's pull could distort Earth's path, maybe even tear away what's left of its moon or atmosphere. The encounter would be beautiful and brutal in equal measure, like a ghost brushing past a fire, glowing for an instant before drifting away again. Over eons, rogue Earth's path could take it through the spiral arms of the Milky Way, weaving between stars and nebulae. It might cross the galactic plane, dive through dark matter clouds, or even pass through the faint gravitational influence of other planetary systems. The chance of being captured by another star's gravity is astronomically small, but not zero. If it ever happened, Earth might settle into a new orbit, warmed once again by the light of a foreign sun. It's an improbable miracle, but the universe has a sense of humor. Maybe one day, our planet could thaw under alien skies, its ice melting into seas once more, like a traveler waking from a long sleep. But until that miraculous rescue, Earth drifts on, silent, frozen, and faithful to Newton's first law. Every motion, every rotation, every subtle vibration continues without purpose, guided only by the mathematics of inertia. It's a kind of cosmic zen, perfect movement without effort, existence without change. And yet, there's a strange dignity in it. Earth, the planet that once teemed with chaos and color, now glides through the void with quiet grace. It carries the fossils of civilizations, the fingerprints of a vanished species, the echoes of laughter trapped in ice. To the universe, it's just another rock. But to us, if anyone were still there to remember, it's home, on the longest, loneliest road trip imaginable. No pit stops, no destination. Just endless night, the hum of motion, and the faint warmth of a world that refuses to stop moving, even when the lights have gone out. Billions of years later, an alien civilization might stumble upon frozen Earth. They'd find evidence of oceans, cities, and a species that once used plastic straws. It would be like discovering Pompeii, but instead of ash, everything is wrapped in ice. The aliens might call us those weird mammals who built Wi-Fi and then froze themselves solid. The story of Earth doesn't end when life fades. It merely enters an era of preservation. Frozen for eons, locked beneath kilometers of crystallized air and ice, our planet becomes the universe's most perfectly preserved time capsule. Every city, every fossil, every fingerprint of civilization lies entombed, waiting. When alien explorers eventually find this drifting relic, they wouldn't see a barren wasteland. They'd see a museum exhibit the size of a world. Picture the scene. An alien expedition ship gliding silently through interstellar space, scanning for anomalies among the background noise of dead stars and cosmic dust. Most rogue planets they encounter are unremarkable. Lifeless rocks, shattered ice balls, or scorched remnants of failed systems. But then, their sensors catch something unusual. A faint heat signature from the core, an atmosphere trapped beneath ice, and most curious of all, geometric patterns beneath the surface. Straight lines, grid-like arrangements, shapes that nature almost never makes. They'd draw closer. The planet would gleam like a gemstone, brilliant white, smooth, and eerily symmetrical in its contours. As they descend through the thin haze of frozen atmosphere, their instruments would begin to detect traces of complex materials embedded in the crust, alloys, polymers, crystalline glass. To their scientific minds, this could only mean one thing. Someone or something once lived here. When they land, their first impression would be of silence, complete, unbroken silence. Not the kind that fills the air, but the kind that exists when there's no air at all. Their footsteps, or whatever equivalent appendages they might have, would leave perfect impressions on the ice, undisturbed by wind or weather. Each motion would feel sacred, like walking through a cathedral of stillness. Beneath their feet lie the ruins of a civilization frozen mid-breath. If they drilled into the ice, the discoveries would come fast. Buried deep within the frost, they'd find what looks like architecture. Rectangular structures, symmetrical and deliberate. Skyscrapers, highways, bridges, all perfectly fossilized. The metal and concrete, preserved by cold, might still hold their shape. Cities like New York, Shanghai, and Cairo would appear as ghostly blue shadows beneath the ice. Alien archaeologists might wander through these frozen mazes, puzzled by our obsession with right angles. Strange, one might remark in its own language, they built up toward the sky they eventually lost. Artifacts would tell even stranger stories. Plastics, those indestructible relics of human convenience, would survive perfectly, their colors muted but intact. Millions of years after we vanished, alien scientists might study these objects the way we study fossils. They'd hold up a plastic bottle and speculate wildly about its function. A vessel for ritual liquids? They might guess. A container for ceremonial water? Or maybe they'd find a smartphone and wonder what kind of creature needed to carry a small rectangle filled with glass and circuits. Clearly, they'd conclude, a communication device for a telepathically limited species. They might even uncover art. Murals buried beneath ice, statues half submerged, fragments of language etched into metal or stone. Our alphabets, once vibrant with meaning, would now be cryptic symbols. The aliens might debate their significance. Was this pictographic script a code? A prayer? A warning? The truth, that these were words, thoughts, and jokes from a vanished world, would be forever beyond them. And then there would be the organic evidence. Deep within the frozen oceans or trapped under ancient cities, they might find remnants of life, bones, DNA, perhaps even preserved tissue. To their scientists, these discoveries would be astonishing. They'd reconstruct our anatomy in laboratories, puzzling over the strange symmetry of human bodies. Bipedal, one might note, but inefficiently balanced, large brain mass, yet prone to emotional instability, curious. Eventually, they'd stumble upon our greatest contradiction, evidence of immense intelligence coexisting with astonishing self-sabotage. Fossilized industrial zones, endless plastic debris, and radioactive isotopes layered into the crust would tell a story we could no longer defend. They harnessed the atom, one alien historian might remark, but also spent centuries arguing about whether it was safe to do so. They'd trace the rise of our technology and note how abruptly it stopped, like a symphony ending mid-note. They reached for the stars, another might add, but never got very far. Still, there would be beauty here too. The aliens might visit the remains of a coral reef, now turned to glass-like ice, and marvel at its intricate geometry. They'd find fossils of whales frozen mid-swim, birds preserved in flight, forests encased in crystalline snow. The world would read like a poem written in layers of frost. Even if they couldn't understand the words, they'd feel the rhythm of life that once was. Perhaps, if these beings were advanced enough to feel something akin to empathy, they'd sense the melancholy in this frozen masterpiece. They might see in our world a reflection of their own mortality, the reminder that no civilization, no matter how clever, is immune to time. Maybe they'd even feel a pang of respect for a species that burned brightly, briefly, and left behind such haunting traces of its existence. And so they'd catalog the planet, giving it a name in their own tongue. Perhaps something poetic. The Silent One, or the Museum of Lost Light. They'd record our structures, our materials, our odd symmetry, and our vanished air. Then they'd leave, continuing their exploration of the galaxy, carrying with them data on a world that once dreamed under a star. Long after they depart, Earth would remain what it has become, a frozen monument to curiosity, folly, and beauty. The skyscrapers would stay buried, the oceans would remain glassy, and the plastic straws, our unintentional fossils, would still be there, waiting. To the cosmos, we'd be a whisper in time, a brief glimmer of life that turned its home into a work of art by accident. And maybe, somewhere in their alien museums, under the section titled Extinct Civilizations, there'd be an exhibit dedicated to us, the humans, creatures of light and plastic. It would include a reconstruction of one of our cities, a sample of frozen atmosphere, and a tiny blue marble suspended in glass. The caption might read, "They lived for a moment, but oh, what a vivid moment it was." Even in the deepest freeze, they might persist underground or under the ice. Bacteria living near radioactive decay or volcanic heat could keep going indefinitely. Earth would become a planet of extremophiles, tiny organisms that refuse to give up. If life ever reignited, it might evolve again, starting from these cold survivors. It's tempting to think that once a planet freezes solid, the story of life simply ends, full stop. But Earth has never been one to follow easy scripts. Even when the sky has fallen, the oceans have crystallized, and sunlight has become a memory. The stubborn little phenomenon called life refuses to take a bow. What remains of it now is microscopic, hidden, and heartbreakingly tenacious, a silent rebellion against extinction. Beneath the kilometers of ice that entomb the surface, the deep crust still hums faintly with heat. It's here, in the pores of rocks and the thin veins of water that persist under immense pressure, that life continues its quiet work. These are the extremophiles, microorganisms that treat lethal environments as cozy apartments. They need no sunlight, no oxygen, and no comfort. Some of them feed on the chemical energy released by radioactive decay of elements like uranium or thorium, metabolizing radiation itself. Others draw sustenance from simple chemical reactions between minerals and water, turning the unlikeliest ingredients into the fuel of persistence. We already know from the modern Earth that such organisms exist. Bacteria have been found kilometers beneath the ocean floor and deep inside Antarctic ice, where temperatures hover just above freezing. Some live inside rocks, surviving on the faint trickle of hydrogen released from natural geochemical reactions. Others hibernate in permafrost for tens of thousands of years, waking up as if nothing happened. In a frozen, sunless future Earth, these same types of life, tiny, patient, and nearly immortal, would inherit the planet. Picture what that new biosphere might look like. There are no forests, no coral reefs, no migrations or reproduction as we know it. Life has shrunk its ambition down to the molecular level. Whole ecosystems exist in droplets of water thinner than a hair, nestled in microscopic fractures of rock. Instead of sunlight driving the food chain, it's chemistry. Slow, constant, reliable. Every metabolic process is stretched out over centuries. A single cell might divide once in 1,000 years, yet to it, this is perfectly normal. Time no longer matters. Energy does. The ice above acts as a perfect shield, protecting these subterranean organisms from cosmic radiation. The upper layers may be sterile, but deep down, the pressure and warmth combine to form pockets where water remains liquid and chemistry never stops. It's a strange reversal of worlds. The surface is lifeless, but the underworld breathes. Earth has become an inside-out planet, where existence has retreated into its own crust like an animal curling up for winter. Within these hidden biomes, evolution would continue, just at an excruciatingly slow pace. Mutations would still occur, genes would still adapt, but generations would pass not in years or decades, but in epochs. Over millions of years, entirely new kinds of organisms might arise. Creatures optimized for low-energy living with biochemical tricks we can scarcely imagine. Perhaps some would evolve antifreeze proteins to keep their cytoplasm from solidifying, or enzymes that operate efficiently near absolute zero. These beings wouldn't be alive in the way we think of life. They'd exist in a state between motion and stillness, a molecular meditation that could last until the universe itself cools. And while most of Earth's biosphere lies deep below, a few hardy microbes might still cling to cracks in the ice nearer the surface. Periodic geological activity, tiny earthquakes, thermal vents, or even the impact of space debris could momentarily expose small pockets of liquid water. In these fleeting windows of warmth, cells would awaken, metabolize, and reproduce before freezing again. It's a stop-motion version of life, flickering in and out of activity as conditions allow. To a passing observer, the planet might look inert, but under a microscope it would be teeming with stubbornness. If life could persist for long enough, there's even the faint possibility of revival. Perhaps, billions of years from now, Earth's wandering path takes it near another star. The distant sunlight would warm the surface slightly, melting the outer layers of ice. Oceans might briefly return, and with them, a second genesis. Those ancient microbes, the holdouts of a forgotten world, could bloom once more. From their chemical chatter, ecosystems might reawaken, simpler, smaller, but alive nonetheless. It wouldn't be the same Earth we knew. It would be a sequel written by bacteria who outlasted eternity. In this frozen future, life becomes something more profound than biology. It becomes philosophy. These microbes aren't competing for dominance or thriving on abundance. They're embodying persistence itself. Their existence proves that life is not defined by comfort, beauty, or even complexity. It's defined by refusal, the refusal to stop, even when everything says it should. And there's something deeply poetic about that. The grand dramas of evolution, the rise and fall of dinosaurs, the march of humanity, the invention of machines and art, all of it ends in this quiet coda. A single cell, buried miles beneath ice, dividing slowly in the dark. No audience, no purpose, just the act itself. In that humble persistence lies the same defiance that once built civilizations and reached for the stars. If the universe ever notices, it might smile at the irony. Even after stars burn out and galaxies fade, life, on this small, forgotten world, will still be whispering, molecule by molecule, "I am not done." Perhaps that's the truest legacy of Earth. Not its monuments, its technologies, or its vanished species, but the endurance encoded in the simplest forms of life. The microbes beneath the ice are not just survivors, they're witnesses. They carry the memory of warmth, of sunlight, of oceans, of forests, of us. And as long as they persist, in whatever form they take, Earth is not entirely dead. It's merely waiting, patient as ever, for another chance to live again. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stops, seasons vanish, and time loses meaning. Days and nights are gone, replaced by a constant, quiet darkness. The stars would be the only reminders of what once was, a glittering wallpaper on eternity's wall. The planet wouldn't die instantly, but it would fade into a slow, frozen sleep. There is something unsettling about true darkness. Not the kind that comes when you switch off a lamp or when the moon hides behind clouds, but the kind that exists when light itself is gone, when there is nothing left to bounce, reflect, or illuminate. That's the new reality of Earth now. The concept of day has evaporated. Morning no longer follows night. The planet still spins out of sheer momentum, but that motion has become meaningless. There is no sunrise to greet it, no sunset to close the cycle. Earth has become a world without rhythm, a place where time itself has lost its heartbeat. In this endless night, the familiar patterns that once governed life have dissolved. The tilt of Earth's axis no longer produces seasons. The equator no longer sweats, and the poles no longer freeze. They've all merged into one uniform, frigid sameness. If there were anyone left to experience it, they'd find the concept of weather obsolete. There are no winds, no clouds, no rain. The air, what's left of it, hangs perfectly still, too heavy and cold to stir. Every mountain and valley lies buried beneath ice, unchanging, untouched. The planet has stopped breathing. And yet, for all its stillness, this darkness has a strange kind of beauty. The stars, once faint and flickering, now blaze with crystal clarity. Without atmosphere or light pollution, the sky is a cathedral of starlight. You could see the Milky Way stretching across the heavens in impossible detail, its spiraling arms gleaming like rivers of powdered silver. Distant galaxies would glow softly, faint smudges of light millions of years away. Even the background radiation of the universe, the dying echo of the Big Bang, would shimmer faintly across the sky, a cosmic afterglow that only deepens the silence. From the surface, the stars don't twinkle anymore. Twinkling, that charming flicker, is caused by air turbulence, something that no longer exists here. Instead, the stars shine steady, sharp, and almost cruel in their precision. The constellations we once used to tell stories would remain, but they'd mean nothing now. There is no North Star to guide travelers, no zodiac to mark the passage of months. The heavens are static, frozen just like the world beneath them. For the first time in history, Earth's sky is utterly honest. It shows exactly what eternity looks like. The human sense of time, if it still existed here, would collapse entirely. Our entire concept of hours, minutes, and days evolved from the rising and setting of the sun. Without that cycle, what does tomorrow even mean? The planet still rotates every 24 hours, but rotation without light is motion without meaning. It's like a clock whose hands move but whose numbers have been erased. The last remnants of human civilization, had they survived underground, would have to invent artificial rhythms. Lights that dim and brighten according to old calendars. Alarms to simulate the passage of days. But those would be rituals, not realities. The sun was never just a source of warmth, it was a metronome for existence. Without it, time is just darkness stretched thin. On the surface, the silence deepens into something profound. No waves crash. No trees sway. Even the occasional geological rumble is swallowed by the ice. Sound can't travel well through the frozen air, and so the planet becomes a tomb of quiet. It's as though the world has turned inward, holding its final thoughts close. If there were a poet left alive, they might say the earth is dreaming, a long, cold dream that will never end. There's also a haunting sense of preservation in this eternal night. The cold halts a decay almost completely. Fossils, bones, and even the ruins of human cities remain untouched, preserved indefinitely in ice. Books that once would have crumbled in centuries could last for millions of years, frozen mid-sentence. Entire skylines stand unweathered, locked in glacial crystal. If anyone, or anything, were to discover the planet far in the future, it would be as if the moment of extinction had just happened yesterday. The endless night has become a cosmic pause button, freezing not just matter, but memory itself. Even the rotation of the Earth, while meaningless to us, continues as an act of stubbornness. The planet spins like a slow, forgotten top, casting no shadow, orbiting no star. Each turn is an act of defiance against total stillness. Deep within, the molten core still glows faintly, sending out whispers of heat that ripple through the frozen crust. It's the last trace of movement, the faintest pulse of a planet unwilling to go completely quiet. If a spacecraft were to pass by, perhaps piloted by alien astronomers or wandering probes, it would see Earth as a gleaming relic adrift in the dark. Sensors would detect faint magnetic fields, ghostly traces of radioactivity, and a residual warmth from within. From afar, the planet would seem deceptively peaceful, a sphere of white and blue light gliding through the void. But the closer they looked, the more they'd see what's missing. No clouds, no reflections of ocean waves, no hints of motion. Just perfection. Beautiful, frozen, and final. And yet, even perfection can ache. The endless night is not violent. It's gentle, absolute, and heartbreakingly indifferent. The sun didn't destroy Earth. It simply left. And that absence became the slowest, quietest apocalypse imaginable. The planet didn't die in flames. It fell asleep, its pulse slowing until it became indistinguishable from stillness. It's an ending without anger, an extinction without noise. Perhaps, in a poetic sense, this is how worlds prefer to go, not in cataclysm, but in silence. The stars will keep shining, the galaxies will keep spinning, and the universe will forget this once living planet that orbited a long-gone sun. And yet, if the cosmos could remember, if it could dream, maybe it would dream of Earth, the planet that once glowed blue in the light of morning, now wrapped in the gentlest night of all. It's a strange kind of immortality. Earth hasn't vanished. It's simply resting, forever turning in the dark. A frozen lullaby drifting through space. A reminder that even in endless night, there was once light, and the memory of it still lingers, quietly, in the ice. Eventually, even the core cools, and Earth becomes a solid, silent sphere drifting through infinity. No light, no heat, no sound. Just the echo of what once was. But in that quiet darkness, Earth's story doesn't end. It becomes a time capsule of life. A message to the cosmos that, once upon a time, a small blue planet burned bright under a distant star. At last, the planet's inner fire gives out. After billions of years of endurance, the molten heart of Earth, the restless iron and nickel engine that once drove mountains, earthquakes, and magnetic fields, solidifies completely. It happens slowly, molecule by molecule, until the last drop of liquid metal crystallizes into silence. The great thermal arteries of the planet, the mantle plumes, the convection currents, stop moving. For the first time since its creation, Earth's heart no longer beats. On the surface, nothing changes suddenly. There's no grand explosion or dramatic collapse. Just a gradual dimming of what little heat remains. The ice, already kilometers thick, becomes eternal. The faint geothermal warmth that once nurtured pockets of life fades until the cold wins completely. Even the last surviving microbes, the ones that clung to radioactive warmth and geological heat, finally freeze into stillness. Not dead exactly, just suspended in perfect preservation, atoms locked in place like fossils of chemistry. It's strange how stillness can feel both peaceful and immense. Earth, once a riot of weather and water and movement, now drifts through space as a perfect sphere of quiet. Its rotation slows slightly over the eons, but inertia keeps it turning. Slowly, gracefully. There is no day or night anymore. No seasons. No glow from within. Just a sphere of ice and stone gliding endlessly through the cosmic dark. The silence isn't empty. It's full of memory. Every frozen layer of crust and sediment is a page in the story of what was. The magnetic field, once the planet's invisible guardian, fades with the cooling of the core. Without it, Earth no longer hums with electromagnetic energy. Its once powerful field lines, those shimmering shields that once danced with solar winds to create auroras, fall still. The planet's compass, literal and metaphorical, goes dark. The ghosts of those magnetic lines, however, remain fossilized in the rocks, like etchings in stone, a magnetic diary no one will ever read again. Over millions of years, even the faint heat that lingers in the crust seeps away into space. Thermodynamics, patient as ever, demands equilibrium. The planet's temperature equalizes with the cosmic background radiation, the cold glow left from the birth of the universe. At that point, Earth joins the rest of the cosmos in near absolute stillness, existing just a few degrees above absolute zero. The universe itself is the refrigerator now, and Earth is one of the oldest items inside it. If you could look upon it then, from the window of some alien spacecraft or future probe, you'd see something hauntingly perfect. A dark, reflective sphere glinting faintly in the starlight, its surface smooth and flawless from eons of pressure and cold. No mountains rise anymore. The great forces that once carved them have long gone to sleep. The continents, now fused together under miles of ice, are one seamless expanse. Oceans, mountains, and valleys are all just subtle textures beneath the frost. The planet that once roared with tectonic fury and oceanic storms has finally achieved absolute calm. And yet, it endures. Even in this frozen quiet, Earth remains a monument to what life once was. The cities buried in ice still exist in outline, skyscrapers compressed into glacial fossils, artifacts embedded in crystal, messages written in materials that no longer decay. A curious traveler from another world could, with enough patience, dig into the frozen crust and find them. Relics of culture, art, and curiosity. A fossilized circuit board here, a preserved seashell there, a timeline told in layers of wonder. If any beings discover Earth in this final state, they might realize they are standing on history itself. They'd find carbon signatures in the rock that speak of forests and respiration. They'd find isotopes arranged in ways that only intelligence could produce. Patterns of nuclear decay, industrial chemistry, and metallic alloys that nature never forges alone. They'd know that something extraordinary once happened here. Not for long in cosmic terms, but long enough to leave fingerprints that stretch across eternity. And if those visitors had imagination, they might begin to reconstruct the story. They'd picture oceans teeming with creatures. They'd imagine continents wrapped in green, skies full of color, and beings who built languages, cities, and dreams. Maybe they'd find art, carvings, paintings, digital data preserved by chance, and realize that this species not only lived, but felt. They'd learn that we looked up at the stars, wondered about them, and now, in a cruelly poetic twist, became one of them. A faint speck in the endless night we once admired. But even if no one ever finds Earth, even if it drifts forever unseen, its existence is still its message. The mere fact that it was once alive is written into its chemistry, into the layers of atmosphere now frozen solid. Life happened here. consciousness happened here. It might never happen in quite the same way again, but for a brief cosmic instant, the universe knew itself through the eyes of creatures on this small blue rock. That knowledge, even if lost, is still real. Eventually, the galaxy itself will grow colder and dimmer. Stars will burn out one by one until only black dwarfs remain. Gravity will pull galaxies apart. The universe will fade into a slow, endless expansion. And still, somewhere in that vast dark, Earth will be drifting, mute but magnificent, its frozen crust holding the last physical traces of a world that once sang. It's easy to think of this as an ending, but perhaps it's better understood as a transformation. From living world to cosmic relic, from chaos to stillness, from fire to memory, Earth has become what all things eventually become, a story told in silence. And so it floats on, through infinity, no longer warm, but never truly gone. Every frozen atom, every buried fossil, every quiet trace of humanity is a testament to what once was, a whisper to the universe itself that says, "We were here, we lived, we burned bright."